Welcome back, Leo Lions. This is Mrs. Morgan with today's lesson over volume of cylinders. So we've talked a little bit about volume, and I want you to write down that definition because this is a little different than what we've been doing recently with surface area. So volume is the amount of space that is inside of an object. The amount of space inside an object, and we're talking about a three-dimensional object. So for example, this cylinder, think of like a pop can, a Pepsi can. So all of the Pepsi that we can put inside of that can, so if we were to fill this cylinder and everything inside of here, that is what we call the volume. So the formula for volume of a cylinder is this capital B times H. Now, most of the shapes that we're going to be working with, we're going to have a similar formula to this. But this capital B, we are going to replace, it stands for something else when it is a capitalized letter. So the capital B represents the area of the base. So in a cylinder, and no matter which way it's sitting, whether this way or on its side, the circle is the base. So we want to find the area of that base, and the area of that base we find by using our formula pi r squared. And that's what it says over here. So that capital B is pi r squared. So after that, once we find the area of that base, well then we're going to multiply it by its height to find everything that can go inside of there. So this capital BH, we're actually going to write out the capital B as pi r squared and then times the height. So pi r squared H is the volume formula for a cylinder. And that's what this basically says here, that capital B gets replaced with that pi r squared. So let's look at this example. I personally would always start out what shape are you working with and then write down the formula. So we're looking at a cylinder here. So the formula is volume equals pi r squared H times the height. So over here we have a cylinder. So we want to look at the base. And that base, we are shown that the radius is 3. Now, if we're ever told the diameter, don't forget to cut the diameter in half and find the radius because our formula is pi r squared. It does not have the variable d for diameter in it. So the radius is 3 feet. We have that. The height then of this cylinder is always how tall is it. The outside measurement here is 7.5. That's our height. So what we're going to do is take that formula and we're simply going to replace the two variables. So we want to replace the r with 3 and then the h with 7.5. Now from here we can, and this substitute step is up here, I'm going to leave myself enough room to show then the steps in between here. So 3 squared, we always have to do exponents first, so that's 3 times 3, and then 9 times 7.5. Remember, anything with pi, we can find an exact volume, so we would just need to do 9 times 7.5, which is 67.5. So 67.5, and remember when we find that exact, we just work with the numbers, and then we leave pi in the answer. So 67.5. Now volume, we are multiplying 3 numbers here. We're multiplying the radius times the radius. Remember, that's what our 3 squared is. So 3 times 3, and then we're also doing it times the 7.5. So volume is labeled in cubic feet. So it's actually the amount of cubes. If we were to draw a whole bunch of cubes inside this, and these would be 3-dimensional, how many cubes would it take to fill up this shape here? So that's actually what we're finding. And since this is feet, we would label it with, and I don't want to forget that pi symbol. So 67.5 pi, and that it is cubic feet. Feet cubed. So that is what we call the exact volume, and that's in terms of pi because pi is in our answer. Now, we can take it one more step and we can actually do 67.5 times pi. So I'm just going to simply add the times pi on there. And we get 212. If we round to the nearest tenth, it'd be 0.1. So 212.1. And then that is, again, cubic feet or feet cube. And that is what we call then our rounded answer. That is actually multiplied by the value of pi. So again, I have two answers here. They're the exact same answers. One of them is just rounded and one of them has the pi symbol in it. So there's how we find volume. We're going to do a couple more on the back side, and then we're going to use the actual volume of a cylinder and find the height. So I want you guys to pause the video here, and I want you to practice these two examples on your own, following the exact same steps we did on the front side. So first step, and there are two different cylinders here. So this first one, we want to write down what is the formula. We have pi r squared, the area of the base, times the height. So over here we have the radius is 1.5, and then we have our height is 9.4. So I'm going to rewrite pi, replace r with 1.5, and replace h with 9.4. Now, from this step, we can actually do two of those in one step. So we can do that 1.5 squared, and then we could also multiply it by, the height was 9.4. So we get 21.15. So again, this is what we call the exact. All I am doing is working with the numbers, the 1.5 squared times 9.4, and I'm leaving pi in the answer. So 21.15 pi, and then in this example our label is meters, so it'd be meters cubed, and that is what we call the exact volume in terms of pi. And then last step, we can actually take that, and I'm just going to do times pi and round it to 66.4, and again meters cubed. And so there is what we call then the rounded volume. So if the instructions just say the rounded volume, if it says find the volume and round to the nearest tenth, well, you could skip that middle step with the answer with pi in it there. And you could plug in pi times 1.5 squared times 9.4 all into your calculator and jump to that 66.4. But I'm showing you that middle step just in case the instructions do say find the volume in terms of pi. All right, next one. Now this one, hopefully we figured out that we had to cut this diameter in half. Since the diameter is 13, then we need to do 13 divided by 2. So the radius is 6.5 centimeters. We cannot plug 13 into our formula. And then over here, our 12.5 centimeters, that is our height. So same process, let's write down our formula. Pi r squared times height, and then we're going to replace the radius with 6.5, square it, and then the height was 12.5. So again, oops, and I'm running into my next problem here. Again, we can plug all of this into our calculator at once with just the numbers. So 6.5 squared, and then multiply by 12.5 for the height. We get 528.125. I am not going to round it because remember, this is my exact answer in terms of pi, so we wouldn't want to round anything in that answer. So 0.125. We haven't multiplied by pi yet, so that pi is still in the answer. Our label is centimeters cubed. So this is the exact volume in terms of pi. And then the last step, we can take that 528.25, multiply it by pi. We get 1,659.2. So 1,659.2 centimeters cubed. and that is our rounded volume. All right, now that is just simply using the formula, plugging in your radius and your height, and finding the volume of cylinders. This next example says find the height. So this one, we don't know what this height is. This is what we're trying to find. But we do know that the volume is 192 inches cubed. So we're actually going to kind of be working backwards in this one, and we are told the radius as well. So let's again start as we did in all of our other previous examples and do volume is pi r squared h. So write down our formula. Now let's replace what we know. We know the volume. So in place of this v, I'm going to put 192 over on the left side. Now pi is a symbol for 3.14, so we're not going to replace that. The radius we do know is 2.5, so I'm going to replace r with 2.5, and there's squared. But we don't know what h is, so I'm actually going to leave the variable h in the equation or in that formula. Once we do this, all we have to do is solve this equation. If you think back to when we solved equations and our goal is to get this variable h, it's on the right side. So we want to get that h all by itself. That's what we want to solve for. So a couple things we can do. Well, 2.5 squared, we could plug that into our calculator and actually figure that out. So we could simplify 2.5 squared as 6.25. So I'm going to rewrite everything exactly how it is, except in place of 2.5 squared, I'm going to do 6.25. And again, I'm leaving that h there. Now, a couple different ways we could start solving for h. We have two things we have to get rid of, a pi and a 6.25. Remember that all of these are being multiplied by each other. So to undo it, to get rid of those numbers, we have to do the opposite and divide. Now you can choose either pi or 6.25 to get rid of first. I'm going to get rid of 6.25 since pi is an irrational and never-ending number. All right, 6.25 divided by 6.25, well, that's how we get rid of it, and that's how we just have pi times h, or pi times the height. Now, remember, that line is there to remind us if we do something to one side, we have to do it to the other side as well. So we want to do 192 divided by 6.25, and we get 30.72. Again, don't round yet, especially because that only has 2 decimal places, so we want to use all of it for a more accurate answer. So 30.72 equals pi times h. The exact same thing we started out with, all we did was just divide both sides by 6.25. Now, next step, how do we get h by itself? We have to get rid of pi. So pi times h, the opposite, we want to divide by pi. And then again, remember, whatever we do, and pi divided by pi, that's how we just got those to cancel out. And whatever we do to one side, we have to do it to the other. And I'm going to move this h up. And now notice, this is what our whole goal was. We were trying to get h by itself, and it is now left on that right side all by itself when we did pi divided by pi. So last step, all we have to do is 30.72, and divide it by, divide it by our pi symbol. And we have 9.77, so if we round that answer, it would be about 9.8. Oh no. And I just lost all of my notes. So the last part there, what we were working down towards was 9.8. Actually, let's see if I go out. And there, it did save my work. All right, so the height here was 9.8 if we rounded it, and everything in this problem was labeled with inches, so that is a measurement. I am going to change my equal sign to a little wavy approximately. So the height of that cylinder is about 9.8 inches. So if we're given the volume and the radius, we can kind of work backwards and undo our equation to solve for the height of the cylinder. So that is our lesson over volume of a cylinder, pi r squared times the height.